My son-in-law called me a rustic embarrassment in the doorway of the mansion my retirement savings bought. My daughter told me I didn't belong with important people. They thought the old contractor was finished. They were about to learn I still owned the blueprint. If you're listening to this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. This story begins not with anger, but with the smell of pie. Cinnamon, toasted pecans, and vanilla. The scent filled the cab of my old Ford F-150. It wasn't just the smell of Thanksgiving. It was the smell of Mary. The pie sat on the passenger seat, wrapped in her favorite checkered towel. Mary always said her pecan pie wasn't just dessert. It was a memory keeper. I held onto that towel, running my thumb over the faded fabric. I hoped it still held some of her magic. Maybe I was just a fool. It had been 3 years since Mary passed. 3 years of silence in our small bungalow. 3 years of holidays that felt hollow, empty. The joy had leaked out of the world when she left. I was 65, retired. I spent my life running Miller Construction. My hands, rough and calloused, built half the neighborhoods in this city. They built homes for families, solid foundations, but lately these hands mostly just held memories, and memories couldn't build a future. My daughter Chloe was all I had left, and as I drove, a cold knot tightened in my stomach. I wasn't sure I even had her anymore. The distance between us had grown wider with every passing year. The invitation wasn't warm. It wasn't a phone call. It was a text message. Not even from Chloe. It was from her husband, Mark. Thanksgiving, 4 p.m., the Highlands, gate code 178. That was it. No can't wait to see you, Dad. Just logistics, cold and sharp. Mark was an investment banker, a man obsessed with what he called optics. Gate code 178. That was it. No can't wait to see you, Dad. Just logistics, cold and sharp. Mark was an investment banker, a man obsessed with what he called optics. How things looked mattered more to him than how things were. He was all polish, no substance. Since Chloe married him, my sweet girl changed. The girl who used to love the smell of sawdust and the sight of blueprints started using words like leverage and brand identity. They lived in the Highlands, a gated community perched on the hill, looking down on the rest of the city, looking down on people like me. I remembered the phone call last week. Chloe's voice was tight, brittle with stress. Dad, we're hosting this year, she had said. It's a big deal. Mark's boss, Mr. Harrison, is coming. The CEO. That's wonderful, honey, I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. I wanted to be happy for her. I really did. It is, but she paused. The silence stretched thin. I knew what was coming. Dad, this is a sophisticated crowd. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Sophisticated. A word that meant I wasn't welcome. Please, just try to blend in, she continued. Her voice rushed. Maybe buy a new jacket. And please, don't talk about construction or plumbing. Stick to safe topics, like the weather. Blend in. The words stung, as if I were a stain she needed to hide. An embarrassment. I thought about the sacrifices. The years Mary and I went without vacations, driving the same beat-up car for 15 years, all so Chloe could go to that expensive university, the place where she met Mark. We gave her everything. We thought we were building her future, but the sacrifices didn't stop there. They never did with Mark. Just 6 months ago, Mark came to me. I remember the day clearly. It was raining. He sat in my small living room, his expensive suit damp, his face pale with desperation. He couldn't look me in the eye. They needed a massive down payment for the mansion in the Highlands. The bank, he said, was being difficult. It's an investment in our future, Thomas, Mark pleaded. He always used my first name, never Dad. We need this address to establish ourselves, to show the world we've arrived. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even blink. I liquidated a significant portion of my retirement savings. It was money Mary and I had saved for our golden years, our safety net. The trip to the Grand Canyon we never took. But what were golden years without family? I gave them the money. I stretched my own budget thin, living on beans and toast some nights. I believed I was investing in their happiness. I didn't realize I was funding my own obsolescence. Now, driving through the imposing iron gates of the Highlands, I felt small. The lawns were impossibly green, even in late November. The houses weren't homes. They were monuments to wealth, monuments to ego. I pulled my old truck into their curved driveway. It was a parade of luxury. Gleaming Mercedes, BMWs, and a sleek black Bentley parked near the entrance. My Ford looked like a rusty smudge next to them. A mistake. I straightened my tie. One of the three I owned. It was the same tie I wore to Mary's funeral. I picked up the pie, the warmth radiating through the towel. "Well, Mary," I whispered, looking at the pie, "let's see what they think of your cooking." I walked up the stone path, the sound of my worn boots echoing in the cold air. I rang the bell. The sound echoed inside, loud and intrusive. The door swung open almost immediately. It was Mark. He was wearing a tailored Italian jacket. His smile was bright, blinding, and completely artificial. It vanished the moment he saw me. The light went out of his eyes. "Thomas," he said. His voice was flat, dead. He glanced past me, at my truck parked in his pristine driveway. His lip curled slightly, a flicker of disgust so fast you might miss it. I didn't miss it. He didn't step back to let me in. He just stood there, a human barricade blocking the doorway. His territory. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mark," I said, holding up the pie. "A peace offering." Mark didn't look at the pie. He looked at me. His eyes were cold, assessing. "Look, Thomas," he started, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of expensive scotch. "Tonight is crucial for my career. Mr. Harrison is here. The CEO." He paused, letting the weight of the name hang in the air. "We need everything to be perfect," he continued. "The optics have to be flawless. Optics. Always optics." He looked me up and down. His eyes lingered on my boots, my suit jacket. The judgment was palpable. A physical weight pressing down on me. "I understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The humiliation burned in my throat. "I won't get in the way. I just want to see Chloe." "It's not about getting in the way," Mark snapped, his patience evaporating. "It's about the image you look." He searched for the word de-insult, the one that would cut the deepest. "Rustic," he finally said. "It undermines the atmosphere we've curated. Rustic. Undermining." The words hit me like a physical blow. The atmosphere they'd curated, with the money I provided, the house I helped buy. Mark's expression hardened. He wasn't just embarrassed, he was angry. Angry that I dared to show up. "Listen to me, old man," he hissed, his voice dripping with contempt. "I am securing our future tonight. Your little life, your little world, it means nothing here. You don't fit." The cruelty was staggering, but he wasn't finished. He saved the worst for last. "That little bit of cash you chipped in for the down payment," he scoffed. He actually laughed. A dry, rasping sound. A drop in the bucket. We could have gotten it from anywhere. "Don't think you bought a seat at the table." A drop in the bucket. My life savings. Mary's legacy. Reduced to pocket change. He leaned in so close I could see the pores on his nose. "I have nothing to thank you for," he snarled. "Now, do us a favor. Get lost." I couldn't breathe. The cold air suddenly felt suffocating. I looked past him, desperate, trying to catch a glimpse of my daughter, my anchor. And then I saw her. She glided into the foyer. She looked stunning in a gold cocktail dress. She looked so much like Mary it hurt. My heart ached with a familiar grief. But when she saw me, her face didn't light up. It tightened. Her expression mirrored Mark's disapproval, a perfect reflection of his disdain. "Dad?" she said, her voice strained. Not happy, not welcoming, just stressed. "Chloe, honey," I started, my voice shaking. I hated how weak I sounded. "Mark says I can't come in." I waited for her to defend me, to rush to the door, to tell Mark he was being cruel. She walked closer, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. The sound was cold, clinical, like a judge's gavel. She stopped next to Mark. She slipped her arm through his, a united front. "Dad, Mark is right," she said, avoiding my eyes. She couldn't even look at me. She looked at my shoulder, at the doorframe, anywhere but my eyes. "Tonight is crucial for us, for our future." "It's Thanksgiving, Chloe," I pleaded. "I'm your father. I brought Mom's pie." "I know what day it is, Dad," she said, her voice rising in irritation. "But you don't understand the pressure we are under. The people in there, they control the city. They are important." She paused, took a deep breath, and then delivered the final blow. The one that shattered my heart. "Dad, only important people will be at this dinner," she said, her voice cold and clear. "You don't belong here." The world tilted. The container of the pie felt heavy in my hands. The warmth was gone. Everything was cold. My own daughter, my own blood, important people. I had spent my life building things, making things work, fixing what was broken. I thought that mattered. I thought being a good father mattered. But standing there looking at the two of them, so polished, so cold, so perfect, I realized I was just an embarrassment. A smudge on their perfect portrait. A reminder of where they came from. I turned around. I was ready to leave. Ready to walk back to my empty house, sit in the silence, and let the grief swallow me whole. But then I thought of Mary. I thought of her hands, kneading the dough, crimping the edges of the pie. I thought of her fierce love, her unwavering insistence that family was the only thing that truly mattered. She would never have walked away. She would have fought, and suddenly I knew I wouldn't walk away either. Not yet. I turned back around. My jaw set. The grief turned into something else. Something harder. Anger. "No," I said. My voice was low, steady. Surprised myself. Mark and Chloe stared at me, shocked. They weren't used to defiance. They were used to obedience. "Excuse me," Mark said, his voice dripping with disbelief. He adjusted his expensive cuffs. A nervous twitch. "What did you just say?" I said no, I repeated. Louder this time. "I am not leaving." I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold November air. "I drove 45 minutes to be here," I continued, my voice vein strength. "I brought the pie my wife made every Thanksgiving for 30 years, and I'm going to wish my daughter a happy Thanksgiving inside her own home. The home I paid for." I pushed past Mark. I forced my way into the foyer. He stumbled back, surprised by the strength in my old arms. The sudden warmth of the house hit me. The air was thick with expensive perfume and spiced wine. The foyer was crowded with people. Dozens of them, all dressed in their finest clothes. The music stopped. The murmur of conversation died down. A sudden, suffocating silence. Every eye turned toward me. I saw a woman with diamonds dripping from her ears. Eleanor Vance, a prominent socialite I recognized from the society pages. She gasped audibly. She covered her mouth with a manicured hand, her eyes wide with shock. They stared. Their expressions ranged from amusement to disgust. I felt a flush of shame crawl up my neck, the feeling of being profoundly out of place, an intruder. But I pushed it down. I had every right to be here. Mark rushed after me, his face red with fury. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You listen to me, you old fool," he shouted, losing all composure. The mask slipped. The polished banker was gone, replaced by a sputtering, entitled brat. "You will not ruin this night for me." He screamed, "Security!" He yelled the word, gesturing wildly toward a man in a dark suit standing near the entrance. "We need security. Get this man out of my house." The security guard started moving toward us. His expression was uncertain. He looked at me, then at Mark, confused. He didn't want to tackle an old man on Thanksgiving. "Mark, stop," Chloe pleaded, grabbing his arm. She was horrified, not by his treatment of me, but by the scene we were causing. The optics were shattering. "Mr. Harrison is right there," she hissed, her voice frantic. She pointed toward the grand piano. An older man stood there. Silver hair, intelligent eyes. He was watching the scene unfold with a curious expression. The CEO, Chloe, turned to me, her eyes blazing. Not with love, not with concern, with pure unadulterated panic. "Dad, you are making a scene," she whispered fiercely. "Go to the kitchen, now." She pointed toward a hallway at the back of the foyer. I realized she wasn't inviting me in. She was trying to hide me. She wanted to shove the embarrassment into a back room, out of sight of the important people. I walked toward the kitchen, my shoulders straight, my head held high. I refused to look like a scolded dog. I passed by groups of people who quickly looked away. Eleanor Vance turned her back completely. They didn't want to make eye contact with the unwanted guest. The rustic embarrassment. The kitchen was a whirlwind of activity. Caterers in white jackets rushed back and forth, carrying trays of appetizers and glasses of champagne. I found an empty spot on the stainless steel counter and placed the pie down. The humble, towel-wrapped pie looked absurdly out of place in the gleaming, industrial-grade kitchen. It didn't belong. Just like me, a young caterer, a woman with kind eyes and a tired smile, noticed me. Her name tag read Sarah. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked quietly, pausing in her work.
"Can I get you a glass of water?" "I'm fine, thank you," I said. Her simple kindness almost broke me. It was more compassion than I had received from my own daughter. A few minutes later, Chloe stormed into the kitchen. Her face was tight with anger. The gold dress seemed too bright, too cheerful for the ugliness in her eyes. "What do you think you were doing?" she demanded, her voice low and sharp. She didn't want the guests to hear her berating her father. "I brought the pie," I said quietly. "You embarrassed me," she hissed, leaning in close. Her perfume was overwhelming, cloying. In front of everyone, Mr. Harrison saw the whole thing. "Do you know how that makes us look? How that makes Mark look? Maybe you should be embarrassed by the way you treated your father," I retorted. The anger was rising again, hot and bitter. "Don't you dare lecture me," she snapped, her voice rising. "You have no idea how the world works. The real world." She looked at me, her eyes filled with contempt. A look I never thought I'd see on my daughter's face. "You live in your little bubble," she continued, her words like shards of glass. "Building birdhouses and thinking you're some kind of saint. But out here, image is everything. And you, Dad, you are ruining mine." Birdhouses. That's what she thought of my life's work. She paused, taking a shuddering breath. "Just stay in here," she ordered. "Don't talk to anyone. And as soon as the guests are seated for dinner, you slip out the back door. Understand?" I didn't respond. I just stared at her, searching for a glimpse of the sweet, loving daughter I used to know. The little girl who used to sit in my workshop handing me nails, asking me to build her a dollhouse. I found nothing, just a cold, ambitious stranger wearing my daughter's face. She turned and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the caterers and the smell of food I would never taste. Sarah the caterer avoided my eyes, pretending to be busy organizing silverware, but I saw the pity in her expression. I leaned against the counter. The exhaustion crept into my bones. I was in my daughter's house, but I had never felt more alone. I needed air. I walked out the back door of the kitchen, into the sprawling backyard. The cold air hit my face, refreshing and cleansing. I wandered toward the edge of the patio, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn, illuminated by dozens of spotlights. It was a stage set, a performance. Then I heard voices coming from the side of the house. I recognized Mark's voice immediately. Arrogant, booming. He was holding court. He was talking to a group of younger men, all dressed in expensive suits, all hanging on his every word. One of them, a young man with eager eyes and a slightly too tight collar, I recognized as James Peterson. He was Mark's Hughes associate, fresh out of business school. "The key is leverage," Mark was saying, his voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "We've been very fortunate, of course." He paused, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "My family has deep roots in this city," he continued. "Old money, you know, it certainly helps when establishing a foothold in the market. Pedigree matters. Old money. Pedigree." The lie was so blatant, so audacious, it took my breath away. He was erasing me, erasing the years of hard work, the sweat, the sacrifice, the retirement fund that built his foundation. He was ashamed of where he came from, ashamed of the truth, ashamed of me. I walked back into the house. The realization of Mark's true character settled in, heavy and suffocating. He wasn't just arrogant. He was a fraud, a liar. I found Chloe in the hallway, adjusting a floral arrangement. Her back was to me. "Chloe, we need to talk," I said, my voice tight. She turned, annoyance written all over her face. "What now, Dad? I told you to stay in the kitchen." "The guests are moving to the dining room. I heard Mark," I said, keeping my voice low. "Outside. I heard him talking about old money, about his
family having deep roots in this city. Chloe's expression hardened. She didn't look surprised. She knew. So, she said, her voice defensive. What about it? It's a lie, Chloe, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You know it's a lie. His family is broke. He is taking credit for everything your mother and I sacrificed for. He is erasing us. It's just business talk, Dad, she said dismissively. She turned back to the flowers, adjusting a perfectly placed rose. It's how the game is played. You wouldn't understand, with your simplistic black and white morality. It's wrong, Chloe, I insisted. It's dishonest. It's betrayal. Wrong? Chloe scoffed. She turned back to me, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. Wrong is being poor. Wrong is being weak. Wrong is being irrelevant. She stepped closer, her voice low and vicious. We are none of those things, she continued. Thanks to Mark. Thanks to the life we've built. The life I built for them. Now you keep your mouth shut, she ordered, her finger pointing at my chest. If you embarrass us again tonight, if you ruin this dinner, I swear I will never speak to you again. Understand? I stared at her. The depth of her betrayal was staggering. She wasn't just complicit in Mark's lies. She was actively participating in them. She had chosen the lie over me. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. I heard a voice announce that dinner was served. The guests started filing into the grand dining room. Their laughter echoed through the foyer, expensive laughter. I watched as they found their seats at the long, impeccably decorated table. The chandeliers glittered, the crystals sparkled. I waited in the hallway, assuming I would join them. Despite everything, a small part of me still hoped. Still believed my daughter wouldn't do this, but as the room filled, I realized something was wrong. Terribly wrong. There were no empty seats. Mark appeared at the entrance to the dining room, surveying the table with satisfaction. The lord of the manor. I walked up to him. Mark, I think you forgot to set a place for me, I said. I tried to keep my voice light, trying to pretend this was just an oversight, a mistake. Mark looked at me. His expression was one of pure contempt. He didn't even bother to hide it anymore. I didn't forget, Thomas, he said. His voice was low, vicious. He didn't care who heard him now. We set up a plate for you in the kitchen, he continued, gesturing dismissively toward the hallway. It's easier this way. You wouldn't be comfortable with the conversation at the main table. The insult was so profound, so dehumanizing, I couldn't breathe. Eating in the kitchen, like a servant, like a dog, in the house I paid for, on the holiday dedicated to gratitude. That was the moment. The moment the last thread of hope snapped. I am not eating in the kitchen, Mark, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I am her father. I deserve a seat at the table. Deserve? Mark sneered. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. Don't talk to me about deserve. I am the one who earned this lifestyle. I am the one who built this. He gestured around the room, at the expensive decorations, the powerful guests. You're just a guest here, he said, his voice rising, and a burdensome one at that. I pushed past him into the dining room. The conversation died down. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. The guests noticed the confrontation. They stared, their forks frozen halfway to their mouths. James Peterson, the young associate, stared at Mark with wide, confused eyes. Chloe looked up from her seat. Her face was pale with panic. Dad, what are you doing? She whispered fiercely, rushing toward me. I want a seat at the table, Chloe, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I am your father. I belong here. Why do you always have to ruin things? She hissed, grabbing my arm, trying to pull me out of the room. This night is about our future. Why are you being so difficult? Why can't you just listen? Because I am tired of being treated like I don't matter, I said, pulling my arm away. My voice cracked with emotion. Mark stepped forward. His face was red with fury. He realized he was losing control of the situation. The performance was falling apart. He needed to regain control. All right, that's enough, Mark said loudly. He adopted a tone of false concern. A new tactic. A new humiliation. I think you've had enough to drink, old man, he said, his voice dripping with phony sympathy. Let's get you home. You're clearly unwell. He tried to physically usher me out of the room, implying I was drunk, disorderly, confused. I haven't had a single drink, I protested, shoving his hand away. I stood my ground, demanding the basic respect I was owed. You want respect? Mark screamed, losing all composure. The mask was gone completely now, the ugliness underneath exposed for everyone to see. You want a seat at this table? He yelled, his voice echoing in the silent room. You don't belong here. You're a washed-up old contractor who smells like sawdust and cheap coffee. He stepped forward, invading my space, his finger jabbing into my chest. The room was silent, every eye fixed on us. The humiliation was complete. If this story has kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. It helps our channel grow and bring more stories to light. It was that moment, standing there, that I realized how deep the betrayal went. Listen to me, you pathetic old man, Mark spat, his voice dripping with malice. I built this life. I earned this success. You contributed nothing. He looked around the room, seeking validation from the silent guests. I have nothing to thank you for, old man, he snarled. Now get lost. Before I have security, throw you out. The words hit me like a physical blow. The betrayal was absolute. I looked at my daughter, praying for a shred of decency. A flicker of the girl I raised. A sign that she still loved me. She stood next to Mark. Her arms slipped through his. In united front. Dad, she said. Her voice was cold, clear, delivering the final blow. Mark is right. Tonight is crucial for us. She paused, took a deep breath, and then she said the words that shattered my heart completely. Dad, only important people will be at this dinner. You don't belong here. Go home. The world tilted. The silence in the room was deafening. I had sacrificed everything for her. My life savings, my retirement, my dignity, and she had thrown it all away because I didn't fit her image. I couldn't fight anymore. I didn't have the energy or the desire. If this was what they wanted, if this was who they had become, then I truly didn't belong here. I turned around. My vision was blurred by tears I refused to let fall. The walk out of the dining room felt like the longest journey of my life. I walked past the silent guests, their faces masks of shock and pity. I walked through the grand foyer, the marble floors echoing the emptiness I felt. I was almost at the front door, ready to disappear into the cold night air, ready to accept my fate, when a voice called out from the dining room, "Hold on a moment." It was a strong voice, clear and commanding, a voice used to being obeyed. I paused, my hand on the door handle. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to endure any more humiliation. Suddenly, the voice was right behind me. Partner, wait. I'm with you. I turned slowly. Standing there was Mr. Harrison, the CEO, the man whose approval Mark and Chloe were so desperate to secure. He was looking at me. His expression was one of deep concern. And something else, recognition. Mark and Chloe rushed into the foyer. Their faces were pale, panicked. Mr. Harrison, sir, I am so sorry about this, Mark stammered, trying to position himself between Mr. Harrison and me. A human shield. My father-in-law is unwell, Mark lied, his voice trembling. Confused. We were just getting him home. Please, let's go back to the dinner table. The turkey is getting cold. Mr. Harrison ignored him completely. He looked me straight in the eye. His gaze was steady, reassuring. Thomas Miller, he said, his voice warm and resonant. It's good to finally see you in person. I stared at him, bewildered. I'm sorry. I don't understand. Do we know each other? We've spoken, mostly through your lawyer, Arthur Vance, Mr. Harrison said, smiling faintly. Arthur speaks very highly of you, but I've known your work for decades. Miller Construction, the gold standard in this city. I knew Arthur Vance. He had been my lawyer and friend for 30 years. He handled the sale of my company when Mary got sick. Mark's jaw dropped. He stared at Mr. Harrison, then at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. You know him? Mark asked, his voice weak. Sir, this is Thomas. He's a retired contractor, a nobody. Mr. Harrison turned to Mark. The warmth vanished from his eyes. His gaze was piercing, cold as steel. A nobody? He repeated, his voice dangerously low. Is that what you think, Mark? He turned back to me, his voice loud enough for everyone in the foyer, and everyone still seated in the dining room to hear. It seems there has been a grave misunderstanding here, Mr. Harrison announced. A misunderstanding about what makes a person important. He gestured around at the massive house, the opulent decorations, the superficial display of wealth. You think this is importance? He asked, looking at Mark and Chloe with disdain. You think fancy clothes and expensive cars define a person's worth? Let me tell you what importance is. He pointed at me. This man, Thomas Miller, is the foundation upon which your entire world is built. I stood there, stunned. What was he talking about? I had retired 5 years ago. I sold Miller Construction to a large investment group, Harrison Global Investments. I don't understand, I said, shaking my head. Let me clarify, Mr. Harrison said, turning his attention back to Mark. Mark, you work for Harrison Global Investments, correct? You are a junior vice president in the real estate division. Yes, sir, Mark said, his voice barely a whisper. And you believe I am the sole owner of the company? Mr. Harrison asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, sir, of course. You are mistaken, Mr. Harrison said sharply. 5 years ago, my company was struggling. We were overextended. The market was volatile. We needed a partner with integrity, experience, and significant assets. He looked at me. Around the same time, Thomas Miller was looking to retire. He continued. Miller Construction was legendary. Decades of quality work, impeccable reputation, and a massive portfolio of properties. I remembered the negotiations. They were complicated. Mary was getting sick. My focus was entirely on her. I didn't want to just sell the company and walk away. I wanted to protect my employees, to ensure the legacy of quality continued. So instead of a straight buyout, Arthur structured a merger. I let him handle the details. I just wanted the security of knowing the company would survive. I just wanted to take care of Mary. Thomas didn't just sell his company, Mr. Harrison continued, his voice ringing with authority. He merged it with mine. He invested his life's work into Harrison Global Investments. The reality of the situation started to dawn on me. I had known I was a shareholder. I received quarterly reports, thick documents filled with numbers and jargon that I rarely read. Arthur summarized them for me. I never realized the magnitude of my ownership. I never wanted the flashy lifestyle. I just wanted a simple retirement. Thomas Miller is not just a shareholder, Mr. Harrison announced. He is the majority shareholder. He paused, letting the words sink in. The silence was absolute. He owns 51% of the company. He looked directly at Mark. To put it in terms you might understand, Mark, Mr. Harrison said, his voice dripping with irony. I am the CEO. I run the day-to-day operations. But Thomas Miller, he's the silent partner. He's the owner. He leaned in closer to Mark. He is, effectively, my boss, Mr. Harrison said. And by extension, he is yours. The silence that followed was profound. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the world. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with horror. He had just called the owner of his company a pathetic old man. He had told him to get lost. He had insulted the man who paid his salary, who funded the very lifestyle he was so desperate to protect. Chloe burst into tears. They weren't quiet, sophisticated tears. They were loud, messy sobs of shame, regret, and utter panic. She realized the magnitude of their mistake. The man they had just humiliated, the man they had deemed unimportant, held their entire future in his hands. Dad, she choked out, rushing towards me. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at her. Did it matter if she knew? Because, Chloe, I said, my voice clear and steady now. The anger had faded, leaving only a profound sadness. It shouldn't matter. I looked at the tears streaming down her face. The desperation in her eyes. Whether I'm a retired contractor or the owner of a multi-million-dollar company, I am still your father. I continued. You didn't know I was rich, but you knew I loved you. You knew I sacrificed everything for you. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. And you still turned me away because I wasn't important enough for your fancy dinner party. She flinched as if I had struck her. Miss Harrison, please, Mark begged, his voice shaking. He was completely broken. His arrogance shattered. It was a terrible misunderstanding. I didn't mean what I said. I have the utmost respect for Thomas. He turned to me, his expression pleading, pathetic. Thomas, please, he begged. Forgive me. I was stressed about the promotion. I wasn't thinking clearly. It won't happen again. Mr. Harrison looked at Mark with pure contempt. So you weren't thinking clearly, he repeated, his voice cold. You showed me your true character tonight, Mark, and it is repulsive. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the room. I saw Eleanor Vance nodding slightly in agreement. The social tide had turned. I judge a man not by how he treats his superiors, he continued, but by how he treats his family. How he treats people he thinks can do nothing for him. He looked back at Mark. The judgment was final. You are arrogant, cruel, and lack the basic human decency required to work in our company, Mr. Harrison said, correcting himself. As for your promotion, he scoffed, it's off the table. And as for your continued employment, you are fired, effective immediately. Mark staggered back as if he'd been shot. His career, his status, his entire world crumbled in an instant. Chloe was still sobbing, clinging to my arm. Dad, please, don't let this happen. We'll lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. I looked at her. Her desperation wasn't for me. It wasn't for our relationship. It was for the lifestyle. The money, the status. I gently removed her hand from my arm. The touch felt cold, unfamiliar. You already lost everything that mattered, Chloe, I said, my voice heavy with grief. You lost your mother's legacy. You lost my respect, and you lost your family. I looked around at the mansion, the symbol of their success. It was just a hollow shell, filled with greed and emptiness. I don't belong here, I said, repeating her words back to her. Mr. Harrison put a comforting hand on my shoulder. Thomas, my car is right here. My wife Elizabeth would be honored to have you join us for dinner. We were planning to stay here, but frankly, I've lost my appetite for this place. I looked at him. I saw genuine respect and kindness in his eyes. It was more than I had seen from my own daughter in years. I think I'd like that, William, I said, using his first name for the first time. William Harrison smiled. Excellent. We started to walk towards the front door. The guests inside the house were watching, whispering behind their hands. The facade was broken. The performance was over. Dad, wait! Chloe screamed, running after us. She was hysterical now, her makeup running down her face. What about us? What are we supposed to do? What about Thanksgiving? I stopped and looked at her, one last time. My daughter, a stranger, wearing my memories. Thanksgiving is about gratitude, Chloe, I said softly. It's about recognizing the blessings you have. You seem to have forgotten what those are. I turned and walked out the door, leaving Chloe and Mark standing alone in the foyer of their silent, empty mansion. The fallout from that Thanksgiving dinner was swift and brutal. The stories spread like wildfire through the city's elite circles. Mark's reputation was ruined. He was a pariah, unemployable in the financial sector. James Peterson, the young associate who witnessed the whole thing, quit the firm the following Monday, citing ethical concerns. He sent me a short, respectful email. Chloe and Mark were forced to sell the mansion in the Highlands, at a significant loss. They lost their cars, their country club membership, their status. The life they had built on a foundation of greed and arrogance collapsed. I didn't revel in their downfall. It hurt to watch, a constant ache in my chest. But I also knew it was necessary. They needed to face the consequences of their actions. They needed to learn the hard way. William insisted that I take a more active role in the company. At first I resisted. I was retired. I didn't understand the world of high finance. I met with Arthur Vance, my lawyer. He sat me down in his office, surrounded by leather-bound books. Thomas, I apologize if I wasn't clearer about the extent of your ownership, Arthur said, adjusting his glasses. You were going through so much with Mary. You told me to handle it, to make sure the employees were safe, and the company secure. I did just that. The merger was incredibly successful. Your investment grew exponentially. I realized I hadn't been ignoring the details. I had been hiding from them, William persisted. He valued my experience, my common sense, my understanding of how things were built from the ground up. We need your moral compass, Thomas, he told me. I started going into the office a few days a week. I focused on the quality of the projects, the treatment of the employees, the ethical implications of the deals. I brought a sense of grounding to the company, a reminder that the buildings we created were more than just assets. They were places where people lived and worked. I found a new purpose in my life. I established the Mary Miller Foundation, dedicated to providing affordable housing and vocational training for underprivileged youth. I wanted to ensure that the next generation understood the value of hard work and integrity, the things my daughter had forgotten. About a year later, I was sitting in my office, reviewing the plans for a new community center. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," I called. The door opened, and Chloe stood there. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater. The hardness in her eyes was gone, replaced by a weary sadness. We stared at each other for a long moment, the silence stretching between us, heavy with the weight of the past year. "Dad," she said quietly. "Chloe," I replied, my voice neutral. "Can I come in?" she asked, hesitating in the doorway. I nodded, gesturing to the chair in front of my desk. She sat down, looking at her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mark left me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He blamed me for everything, for losing his job, his status, his future." I felt a pang of sympathy, but I didn't say anything. I waited. I realized it was my fault. She continued, tears welling up in her eyes.
"I wanted the lifestyle so badly. I thought that was what mattered. I forgot who I was. I forgot what you and Mom taught me." She looked up at me, her expression raw, vulnerable. "I treated you terribly, Dad," she choked out. "I betrayed you. I humiliated you, and I am so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know." She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I watched her, the broken pieces of her ambitions scattered around her. The anger I had felt for so long began to fade, replaced by the profound sadness of a father watching his child suffer. I got up and walked around the desk. I knelt beside her and put a hand on her shoulder. She leaned into the touch, craving the comfort she had thrown away. "I know you are, Chloe," I said softly. "I'm working at a small cafe downtown," she said, wiping her eye. "And I started volunteering at the foundation. In Mom's name. I want to rebuild my life. The right way this time." "I'm glad to hear that, Chloe," I said, meaning it. The road to reconciliation was long. The trust was broken. It would take time to rebuild. But she had taken the first step. She stood up to leave. "I brought you something," she said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a small, slightly lopsided pecan pie. "I tried to make Mom's recipe," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "It's not very good, but I wanted you to have it." "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad." Called. I took the pie from her, the familiar smell of cinnamon and toasted pecans filling the air. "Thank you, Chloe," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She nodded and walked out of the office, closing the door softly behind her. I sat back down at my desk, the pie sitting in front of me. It was a peace offering, a symbol of a broken bond that might one day be repaired. That evening I sat in my little bungalow, the silence no longer feeling so heavy. I ate a slice of Chloe's pie. It was a little burnt on the edges, the filling a bit too sweet, but it tasted like hope. I thought back to that Thanksgiving night. The humiliation, the betrayal. They had called me an old man, a nobody. They had told me I didn't belong, but they were wrong. True wealth, I realized, wasn't about the size of your house or the title on your business card. It was about the legacy you built, the integrity you upheld, and the quiet dignity of a life lived honestly. And sometimes, the most important people are the ones we overlook until they are gone. Thanks for listening. Please rate our story in the comments. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot. Because your time matters.